Ahoy there, Captain Benzie here, coming at you with another ship comparison video for EVE Echoes. In today's video we're going to be taking a look at the Minmatar Republic's Bellicose III Covert Ops and the Caldari State's Caracal II. These are both T10 missile cruisers, and like how we had a look at the Vexor II and the Arbitrator III Covert Ops, I want to compare these two ships to help you decide which one is best for you. As we talked about in the Vindicator video, I don't like the concept of a meta in EVE. Ultimately, balance patches do shift things around a bit, and it does cost quite a bit of money to respec if you want to. Having to keep dumping Plex into respecs is going to cost you a lot of real life money, and that's something ultimately I would like to avoid by not getting everyone to jump ship onto the latest meta. This is something that ultimately, it's going to be some people love it, some people hate it. Some people are always going to chase the meta, other people are happy to go for something that's sort of 95% effective, but more fun for them. Anyway, so this isn't going to be a discussion of which of these two ships is outright best. It's going to be a look at the two ships, comparing their similarities and their differences in order to sort of give you an idea of which one might be better for you to fly in particular situations. If you do enjoy this video, please let me know by hitting like on it, sub to the channel for all things EVE Echoes, and if you do want to go the extra mile to help keep me doing what I'm doing, next big project for me is now getting a capture card so that I don't get the little bits of lag here when doing this on PC now, rather than just on directly on phone. You see, I'm actually connected my phone directly to my computer. The aim is that I should be able to stream at some point in the future. Wouldn't that be exciting? Anyway, if you want to help that become a reality, head to Patreon, linked down below in the description, patreon.com/Captain Benzie, where you can pledge to support this channel there. All that said and done then, let's jump right in to talking about the Bellicose III Covert Ops and the Caracal II. Let's start the discussion then by having a look at the two cruisers side by side. These are both T10 cruisers, obviously the Bellicose III Covert Ops representing the Minmatar Republic and the Caracal II representing the Caldari State. Now we're going to have a look at their fitting profiles and their skills in just a moment. I'm going to scroll down to this section here, and we're going to compare these along with the notes that I've got written in front of me, because obviously not everything is shown here, but I can't do a side-by-side comparison when we're having a look at the full fitting screen. Now, first of all then, we have defense. Here, the Bellicose III Covert Ops actually takes the lead at 17,874 compared to the Caracal II's 16,348. But remember, the Caracal II is going to have an additional low slot, and it gets a bonus to damage control units, which is going to make this tankier in the long run. Also, the Caracal II has all of its tank pretty much bumped into its shield bonuses. You'll see that the Caracal II has much bigger shields than it does than the Bellicose III Covert Ops, which means if you're going for an active tank, it's much easier to hold onto that, and in fact shield extenders are going to be a bigger boost overall. Obviously, if you're boosting, say, for the Caracal II here, if you were to boost its shield tank by 30%, that's going to be a bigger number than the Bellicose III's shield tank being boosted by 30%, because the shield tank on the Bellicose III is smaller than the Caracal II's. Hopefully that makes sense. We then have a flight velocity here on both of these. The Bellicose III comes in faster at 317 meters per second, the Caracal II at a piddly 243 meters per second. Or, well, not quite, because if we have a brief look up here at the Caracal II, Advanced Cruiser Command gives it an additional 5% flight velocity for 25% boost overall. That takes that flight velocity of 243 up to 303.75, which is obviously a lot closer to the Bellicose III Covert Ops. The Bellicose, of course, still takes the lead, but the Caracal II is not as far behind as you might initially think it is. The warp speed, though, again, it's not huge, but you've got a difference there of 4 to 3. The Bellicose does come in faster. We then have a mass and an inertia here. The Bellicose III, it's not shown here. The Bellicose III's mass is 11.55 million kilograms and an inertia of 0.4, compared to the Caracal II's 11.91 million kilograms mass, which is bigger, and a slightly smaller inertia of 0.38. When you work these out to an agility rating, you actually get a 4.62 rating for the Bellicose III Covert Ops and a 4.52 for the Caracal II, which means the Caracal II is actually slightly ahead on the agility. It is slightly faster to align and will accelerate and decelerate a little bit faster. There's not much in it at all, but it did surprise me to see that, considering that the Bellicose being a covert ops ship, you'd assume that it was that little bit more nimble. This then brings us to looking at things like the scan resolution. The scan resolution of the Bellicose III Covert Ops comes in at 367 compared to the CaracalII's 276. Now, the thing to mention here though is of course the Bellicose III Covert Ops is often fitted with a Covert Ops cloak, which will reduce the scan resolution there of the Bellicose III Covert Ops by upwards of 40%. So ultimately, if you're fitting with the Covert Ops cloak in mind, then the Caracal is going to end up with a better scan resolution than a Bellicose with a cloak, but of course you can't cloak a Caracal, so that's kind of neither here nor there really, just worth mentioning. Signature radius of these, though, is where things get a little bit interesting. We have the signature radius of the Bellicose III Covert Ops starting at 64.4 meters, then the Bellicose III Covert Ops has a 4% reduction to its signature radius for each level of Advanced Cruiser Command you have, therefore taking its signature radius actually down to 51.52, which is a lot smaller than the CaracalII's 89.1. On the subject of smaller as well, you'll notice that the Bellicose III Covert Ops has a source radius of 217 meters, down from the CaracalII's 267 meters, which means the Bellicose III Covert Ops, while it's not going to be difficult to scan if it's not cloaked, it is going to be harder to scan down than the CaracalII would be, and you can actually reduce the Bellicose III Covert Ops quite nicely using some of the gravity rigs, just to bring that source radius down a little bit further. It is worth spending a brief moment here just to talk, though, between the two, that the capacitor bank of the CaracalII is slightly higher, 2,470 over 2,444. You've got a much higher power grid on the CaracalII, 933 compared to 478, which also means the Caracal is going to be able to oversize some of its modules, whereas the Bellicose III can actually struggle to fit certain things if you want to be a little bit more aggressive with your fittings. We then have a cargo hold that is bigger on the CaracalII than the Bellicose III Covert Ops as well, if that's something that matters to you, but obviously the Bellicose III being able to Covert Ops cloak means you can actually haul cargo a little bit easier, avoiding gate camps by being able to jump through them with that Covert Ops cloak. So that tells us a story here that the CaracalII on paper is bigger, slightly slower, but a little bit more agile, with actually some really nice stats there on its defenses and that as well. But what happens when we start looking at the skills? Well, before we look at that, let's actually have a look at the fitting profile and tie that into the skills. Because the Bellicose III Covert Ops has a fitting profile of 4-4-4, 4 highs, 4 mids, 4 lows, whereas the Caracal has 5 highs, 3 mids, and 5 lows. So the CaracalII wins on its highs and its lows, but loses out on its mid slots, which kind of makes sense considering the Bellicose III Covert Ops is designed around more of that electronic warfare side of things going on there. That means the mid slots on the Bellicose III Covert Ops are probably going to contain things like a sinusoidal field generator if you want to use that, and you're probably going to have at least one target painter equipped because of that target painter target effect. It's also worth noting that we do have that 50% reduction to the warp drive signature radius penalty as well, which means the Bellicose III Covert Ops can actually speed tank remarkably well using a medium micro warp drive. The CaracalII, conversely, gets that 5-second damage control time. But what happens with those 5 high slots? Because we've got 5 high slots on the CaracalII, only 4 on the Bellicose III Covert Ops. Well, let's have a look at the actual skills side by side here. The Bellicose III Covert Ops only has 4 high slots, but it does get 15% increase to medium missile torpedo damage for each level of Advanced Cruiser Command. So at full training of Advanced Cruiser Command there, that's plus 75% to your medium missile and torpedo damage on top of those 4 already. The CaracalII, on the other hand, does not get any damage bonuses, but it gets a 6% reduction to medium missile torpedo and activation time. Now, I couldn't be bothered to sit down with the actual maths here and try and work it out with a calculator, so I did the easier thing and I logged into Fulmination. I took a Bellicose III Covert Ops and a CaracalII, completely stripped it down to its naked constituent parts, filled the 4 high slots on the Bellicose III Covert Ops with pithy C-type medium missile launchers, and the 5 high slots on the CaracalII with pithy C-type medium missile launchers, and had a look at the DPS. The Bellicose III Covert Ops, with no other fittings at all, came to a total of 549.29 DPS, whereas the CaracalII came in at 560.5, which means your paper DPS, at least on the CaracalII, is going to be ever so slightly higher. There's not all that much in there, it's about 11 points of difference there, but remember that does multiply out. By the time you start fitting things like your different missile rigs and ballistic control units in the low slots, those are going to multiply that difference out to a higher number. So theoretically, the CaracalII should have higher paper DPS. The thing to remember though is that the Bellicose III Covert Ops gets that amazing bonus to its target painters. That means that it's going to apply its missile damage better against targets. Ultimately, this means that the Bellicose III Covert Ops can probably get away with fitting things like torpedoes. In fact, I do tend to fit mine with torpedoes for PvE sort of stuff that I'm doing with the cruiser, and sometimes when I go hunting, I will go in with torpedoes in the high slots as well, just to try and hit with as much damage as possible. With the target painter active, obviously I'm increasing the target's signature radius, which means the fact that those torpedoes have a ridiculously large explosion radius is counteracted by me blossoming the target's, blooming the target's signature radius to match it, which helps me apply a little bit better. Ultimately, this kind of gives a weird sort of mix here. The CaracalII is going to have higher DPS, especially if you want to go with torpedoes, but it's going to be less able to apply that DPS. If therefore you're going for sort of like cruiser-on-cruiser PvP, or you want to go for sort of up-close and personal PvE, remembering that the CaracalII probably isn't going to be able to brawl particularly well in Tech 10 anomalies. I couldn't honestly tell you what it can brawl in. It might be able to, in fairness. I've not flown a CaracalII directly yet. I'm talking about all of this on paper. The CaracalII theoretically can get a higher DPS and a considerably stronger shield tank. The Bellicose III Covert Ops, on the other hand, is going to be more nimble, and it's going to be able to sort of apply its slightly lower damage considerably better. So there's a real kind of, it could go either way here. I think in honesty, if I wanted to go for sort of a brawling, hit them in the face with torpedoes, like I sometimes do want to do, if I wanted to go hunting, things like coveters and that kind of stuff, the CaracalII is probably going to do it a bit better, but obviously you've got to be aware you're not going to have a cloak to help you get in and get out, but you are going to be considerably tankier en route. On the other hand, the Bellicose III Covert Ops, you can avoid gate camps with it. For me, I've always been a sucker for Covert Ops enabled ships. Anything that can cloak and be sneaky is going to do well with me. It's why Benzie is trained the way he is. But it's not quite as clear-cut as I thought it would be. And there are definitely examples where I can see the CaracalII cutting ahead compared to the Bellicose Covert Ops. Certainly, if I wanted something that's just going to punch a bit harder and stay in the fight a bit longer, the CaracalII is there. It's a bruiser. I don't necessarily want to call it a brawler, but it's definitely a bruiser. It can deal a bit more damage, and it can take a bit more damage. The Bellicose III Covert Ops, however, makes an excellent hit-and-run vessel, and certainly you've got that additional utility of things like the sinusoidal field generator, going with a target painter in a fleet, and being able to speed tank with a micro-warp drive. I don't know, like when this is giving me sort of, shout-backs to when I did the Vexor 2 and the Arbitrator 3 Covert Ops version of this video, because I kind of went into it looking at the two side by side thinking, right, I want to have a clear idea of when one of these ships is going to be preferential to using the other. And the simple fact is, I can't think of a clear example. I think if you're heading into enemy territory, the Bellicose III Covert Ops is probably going to be better, whereas if you're a little bit closer to home or going for defensive fleets, the CaracalII's got a bit more punch and brawl to it. So that's probably the biggest delineation I can give you between the two. But maybe you've got a better idea than I have. Maybe you're flying the CaracalII or the Bellicose III Covert Ops and you've thought of some stuff that I haven't done with. Maybe you've got some ideas and you've got some concepts of how this is working better than I have. Let me know in the comment section down below. I would love to know anyone here is flying a CaracalII. I've not actually seen one in the wild. I do need to save up enough ISK in order to, fund one and build it and fly it a bit more, but heck, You can kind of see my wallet is not looking overly healthy at the moment, both in real life and in game, but there we go. I will eventually get a Caracal II, fly it, and have a bit of fun with it, and I do appreciate it when people come and say, you know, hey, I've got a Caracal II, I can loan you. I don't like loaning ships, because if I get it destroyed, I can't return it, especially with only 50.297k in my wallet right now. But let me know your thoughts and opinions on these two ships in the comment section down below, and let me know what ships you'd like me to cover in a future video. I hope this has been helpful, I hope it's been enjoyable, and interestingly enough, I hope that the new sort of microphone and computer setup here is making the content a little bit higher quality for you. Please do let me know if you think that I've lost something here by starting to edit and record via PC. I'm still using my phone, this is still my phone screen in my hand here, wired through to my computer. Let me know what you think of all this. I'm appreciative of feedback, both in the comment section down below, or come find me on Discord, Twitter, even on Patreon, however the heck you fancy sort of emailing me or contacting me. I would love to have a chat with you all. Anyway, folks, I'm rambling on now, so without any further ado, thank you for watching, happy sailing, and see you in New Eden.